Dr. Corbett, thank you so much for joining us. And it's just such a tremendous honor to be in virtual space with you. And I just, imagine that everyone watching us, or at least I hope everyone watching us, knows how much we owe to you and your team with the rapid development of the vaccine that now has been administered to more than 50 million people. The vaccine that you developed in partnership with Moderna. So I think maybe a good place to start, in case people haven't been paying attention to kind of your remarkable work, is could you just tell us a little bit about kind of what you've done over the last year and a half to help lead us to the point that today, when we're talking, more than 50% of Americans have now been fully vaccinated. So what have you done? How have you done it? And kind of just share a little bit more about kind of why we should be even more grateful to you than I imagine most of us already are.
Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation to have this conversation with you. And thanks to the foundation for the award. I am completely honored. And I am getting a lot of awards personally, but the team made the dream work. I like to remind people of that. So in collaboration with Moderna for the last probably 4 years, even prior to the pandemic, we had worked on understanding how to make coronavirus vaccines. So this is to basically have a generalizable approach to vaccines for coronaviruses in case there ever shall be a pandemic. And unfortunately, at the latter parts of 2019, we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic started. But because of the work we've done for the last several years, we were prepared enough that we were able to move very quickly in our vaccine development efforts. And so what you're seeing now, where again, today is a milestone in America where 50% of Americans are, or well, at least adult Americans are fully vaccinated, is a milestone that comes almost, I don't know, it's almost like a whirlwind light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, with all of the work that we've done over the last year. And so my role was to lead the what is called preclinical, so that is before a vaccine gets into a human arm at all, stages of the vaccine development. And because of how quickly we were able to do that, that is why the vaccine development and the clinical trials were able to start so quickly. And that is why we're seeing this massive rollout of vaccines right now.
And Dr. Corbett, I think that's a really important point for people to realize, that while it may appear to the general public that these vaccines were developed, at breakneck speed, and they were in many ways, that was possible because of the work that you and others had been doing for years.
Yes, that is certainly possible because of the work that we and others actually around the world had been doing for years, actually predating even me getting a PhD. For upwards of 15 or 20 years, the science has kind of compounded upon each other to what is this glory moment. And I agree, it is important for people to know that for two real reasons. I mean, you know this because your dad actually, his administration actually was the administration that erected the Vaccine Research Center. But for the reasons of understanding just how important putting money into basic research is, and how basic research that sometimes we don't necessarily see what the translation to it is to actual human health, how it all compounds on each other to make these types of transformational events happen in biomedical research. And then secondly, because there are so many other viruses that this could have been. And we, in so many ways, lucked up with it being a coronavirus. If it had have been, for example, Bunia virus or something like that, we may not have been as lucky to be able to have a vaccine this quickly. And so, and it also speaks to what is really scary from a lay perspective around what is considered rapid development of a vaccine. And it speaks to just the organizational effort that goes behind this, both in this moment and also prior to the pandemic.
And Dr. Corbett, you just mentioned, you and your team, and also scientists around the world who've been working on on vaccine development and specifically on mRNA vaccine development, for years, for decades. And so many of the scientists have been women, right?
Mhm.
So Hamilton Bennett at Moderna, Catherine Jansen and Katalin Kariko at Pfizer, Osman Turchi at BioNTech. What do you say? Because I know you've spent a lot of time kind of mentoring girls and young women in the STEM fields. Like, what do you say when girls and young women are worried that maybe kind of you and these other women are the exceptions, that they could never have a career like yours? How do you help kind of give the confidence to girls and young women that they belong in STEM just as much as any boy does?
Yeah, I kind of repeat what are my own personal morning affirmations, which are I am smart, I'm beautiful, and I can do all things. And that is what I think every girl and woman kind of has to continue to repeat to themselves every day, especially in fields like the STEM fields where we are generally underrepresented, and particularly as you move higher up in these fields. And one of the things that really sticks out about all of the women's names that you have just mentioned, whether it be me or Hamilton and etc., is that we aren't the CEO, right?
Yet.
And
Yeah.
yet we aren't the CEO, we are not the director, and oftentimes what is happening is that behind the scenes the work is being done by women, and what that means to young girls often is that they don't get to see me on TV a lot, except in a pandemic or Hamilton or et cetera. And so the visibility is important. And I want that our visibility to speak to the volumes of other women who are behind the scenes working on all sorts of really terrific things in the STEM fields and beyond. And to remind everyone that you can certainly do it. And moreover, I always get that question, what do you say to young girls and young women? Also, what do you say to men? Right? Because they are oftentimes going to have to be the ones that slide over and pull out a seat at the table for us. And so reminding them that we are also smart, along with beautiful, and also can do all things is important too.
Well, and Dr. Corbett, I know that you've had some really extraordinary male mentors, actually, who have recognized your talent, nurtured your talent, and given you opportunities, like given you that seat at the table.
Yeah. And you know what? Frankly, I don't think I would be on this interview and conversation with you had there not been some men who have really been advocates for my career and allies almost in my career with me. They've really walked in the trajectory with me, which has been important because you get to a place sometimes when you don't necessarily have the same roadmap as other people. And so you can get lost if there's not a tour guide. And that's, I think, where advocates come into play.
And people who celebrate your successes.
And people who celebrate successes, for sure. Yes.
We talked about mentors. I also know that you've had teachers who've been really formative for you. And I read that you had a teacher who spotted your talents in science when you were in high school. And I think in this moment where so many kids have been engaged in virtual learning, but thankfully where we're looking forward to hopefully kids being back in the classroom, everywhere in the autumn, can you share how that teacher kind of really saw your talent and what that meant to you? And just what advice would you give to teachers as students come back into the classroom in the fall?
I think that one of the things that is, first of all, teachers have probably the hardest job in the world because they, for about 8 hours every day, are grooming future generations of in this country, Americans, and then elsewhere globally. And it's just hard. And it is also hard to do that in such a mass scale, classroom by classroom, and really to say, especially when a child might be thinking a little bit differently about how they're solving the problem, or maybe, taking a different approach to, a test question or et cetera. It's hard to really speak to that being a gift. And so I like to remind teachers that we are all different. That is actually part of the beauty of this place is that we have the privilege of being diverse enough that people who think differently oftentimes are equally as smart. And I actually was not the best student classically. I really did not like didactic classes. So I didn't like being taught to. I preferred to kind of being given the question and allow myself to figure it out. I, generally speaking, although I was really good in math, I solved problems completely different than the teacher was teaching it because I thought about things a little bit differently. And so there were a lot of teachers who probably wouldn't have pinpointed what that particular teacher did. And so seeing those gifts is important. And moreover than just recognizing it is going in the extra way to say, maybe this thing, this program, or this type of career, you should talk to this person because they do things and they seem to have a similar type of smarts as you. Taking it a little bit further with young people is so important. And early exploration is by far what's going to get us out of the probably many other problems similar to coronaviruses in the future.
Well, and nurturing that creativity and liberating, students to ask questions in different ways so that we can solve problems that we've never imagined when they arise. Although thankfully you had imagined that we might be living in this pandemic because you worked on, vaccine development just in case there might be, a virus like COVID-19. And while we spoke earlier about kind of the extraordinary milestone, that the Biden administration announced today, like during our conversation, that more than 50% of now adults in America are fully vaccinated. And I'm proud to be one of them. We know that the pace of vaccinations has slowed. And especially now, as we think about how do we help encourage, teenagers and their parents to get kids vaccinated? How do we prepare parents like me who have, 3 young kids to, ask whatever questions we may have so that when vaccines are approved for younger kids, we're like ready to go to the pediatrician's office or wherever those vaccines may be being administered. What more do you think we need to be doing to help answer whatever questions may still exist or kind of may exist for parents, in just a few months, or kind of what other access challenges do you think we need to be focused on to ensure we're bringing vaccines to where people are? Kind of what do we need to do, basically, is what I'm asking from your perspective.
Yeah. I always said, even from the beginning, that my job was probably the easiest of everyone in this entire network, and that getting the vaccines into people's arms is difficult. It is, it takes a level of organization that I can't even imagine doing alone myself. And it's certainly outside of my expertise. But one of the things that I have become an expert in, I guess I can say, over the last year has been the communication front of it. And what is the information front of making sure people are in some ways comfortable with being vaccinated. And that level of comfort, what I've heard from parents like you is that, yes, sure, I'm comfortable with myself, but my kids. Parents generally take on a different lens around risk assessment for their children. And a large part of what people are thinking about with their kids is what could maybe happen to them because they are vaccinated in whatever future time point, 10 years from now. And the important thing for us to do as we continue to inform parents is to remind parents that not just for this vaccine, but for other vaccines as well, future implications around safety are just not a thing at all. And that the way that regulatory agencies like the FDA vet vaccines is particularly in adolescents and children is around an entire body of work from every vaccine from the beginning of time, and how that body of work suggests how safety indications happen in children. And so when you get an answer from the FDA, like Pfizer has, and like Moderna will soon, as they are planning to submit their adolescent vaccine package soon, when you get an answer around that, that answer is clear cut. Yes, the risk assessment weighs in the benefit of getting your child vaccinated. And one of the things that's very hard for us as humans is to give up our own risk assessment internally and to allow the experts to do that. But I'm trying to remind people that the risk assessment is done on far greater and more strenuous capacity than we could ever do it for our individual selves, and to really start to, if you can, trust the people who are experts in that, and that is the FDA.
Well, certainly I agree, Dr. Corbett. Admittedly, I wanted to sign my kids up for the Pfizer trial for kind of 2 to 11-year-olds, but unfortunately the nearest trial site was in Rochester. And I don't know how familiar you are with New York geography, but that's about 5.5 hours
Yes.
from.
Yes.
Could quite justify like trekking my kids, like, for a full day's round trip. But I am really excited to be able to get them vaccinated once the FDA has judged it safe and effective, because certainly I do trust their robust oversight. And I think you raise a real question though, Dr. Corbett, as well, which is that we have to rebuild trust in our institutions and in science. And I've really admired how you've used your public platform on Twitter. I'm like very proud to follow you on Twitter, and in interviews I've seen you do where you are very clear about what we know and what we don't know. Because I think that's important in rebuilding trust, is to be transparent about what you even, as a scientist who's been in the vanguard of this work, what you don't know. I think helps hopefully build confidence then in what you do know as well.
Yeah. And in a moment where the data is coming out literally in real time, and it's coming out not just in real time for scientists, but it's coming out in real time for people. So everyone is kind of digesting all of this information together. And so it's a very delicate line to walk as a scientist, because you are confident in those words at the end of whatever data you publish that say, this is what this means. But you also know that in 2 weeks, something could, again, compounding knowledge could come and say, actually, we also know this now, or what we really saw 2 weeks ago was this. And so walking that line with the general public is something that is very tricky. I, admittedly, I'm still learning to do that. But I think that one of the things that I have learned that is important is to, again, just never speak on what you don't know so far. And so I tried to do that, or I try to be very broad around how I do say things. But we're learning together, and we're getting there.
Well, Dr. Corbett, tonight we're honoring you, with our Clinton Global Citizen Award, which we're so honored to be able to do. And as the name implies, it very much is focused on kind of honoring people whose work has had a global impact. And we know that our ability as Americans to be able to truly move forward from COVID-19 is ensuring that the world is vaccinated. And I have spent time and spilled quite a bit of like ink and used a lot of oxygen and expressing kind of what I think we need to be doing to ensuring that, we have real equitable distribution of vaccines and kind of scaling up manufacturing capabilities, kind of scaling up support for vaccinators around the world. But I'm curious, like, what is your perspective on how do we scale up kind of the ability of there to be more Dr. Corbetts in more places around the world? Like, what should our work in helping to support the development of future vaccine scientists look like globally?
Not even, there are the people, but then there are also the enterprises, right? One could beg to say that probably because of what was your dad's vision for the VRC is the reason why all of this is happening right now. But that is something that is a really unique thing for a government research enterprise to have the ability to go from what is essentially just an idea all the way to the translation of a product that's being now distributed around the globe. That is, I think, what was the initial hope of the Vaccine Research Center. It is something that they have learned to accomplish very efficiently. If we could get that type of enterprise at each corner of the globe, I think that that would be so beneficial. And only that kind of thing will allow for the, as you say, Dr. Corbett's, but people who are passionate about science, smart in the way that they think, and forward thinking to be able to have those kinds of careers in their respective countries, or at least nearby countries. And that could only filter into all things being great with the science, right? So right now we have over 200 different vaccine approaches around the world. But the truth of the matter is there are only going to be a select few that are going to have the ability to go to the translational end of things, because just structurally, we don't have that kind of capacity everywhere. And that is unfortunate. And when I was in graduate school, I actually wrote a grant to that end around other research, which was around dengue virus, but to kind of structurally help research enterprises in Sri Lanka to get up to par to where we were in the US. And I think that that is one step that we can take. The second step is that, or the second thing is that, because we are not there, and that type of thing is, 20 years in the making or even more, is that we are all, as like wealthy countries, just going to have to step up to the plate and bat for people. And I think that we're doing what we can in this moment. And then I think that a lot of other countries are following suit, or actually they're doing, some would argue better, but they're doing their part too. And so I think that that is how we get out of this, and working together. I actually, you know what, Chelsea, I haven't seen this level of global collaboration ever. And I'm young. So I, obviously could have missed some things, but frankly, I just really have not, especially when it comes to science. It just, it's been amazing to see that. And if we could keep that level of collaborative effort happening on each different layer of the vaccine effort and all the way up to distribution, I think we'll be fine.
Well, Dr. Corbett, the only kind of analog that's deeply imperfect, but the only kind of, and truly other kind of somewhat comparable example that I can think of is what happened with penicillin production during World War II, where under the Roosevelt administration, there was massive cooperation and collaboration across many different private sector partners, but also globally, cooperation between, scientists here in the US and in Canada and with allied countries in Europe. And we massively scaled up, penicillin production. And, that had huge benefits to saving, thousands of allied soldiers' lives who otherwise would have, been lost to infection. And then that production capacity was largely maintained, which then helped, save truly probably hundreds of millions of lives, in the decades since the end of the Second World War. And so, I just couldn't agree more emphatically that while we've seen unprecedented cooperation, we need to do even more to ensure that we're extending that cooperation out.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And sorry that my nose is running. I have allergies, and I'm also packing to move. So
You're going to
dust all
Harvard,
over everywhere.
right? You're going to Harvard.
I am going to Harvard. So my place looks, this is about the cleanest that I could get in this frame right now.
Well, it's certainly the NIH's loss and Harvard's gain. Are you looking forward to your new role? Like, what are you, and how is it going to be different? Like, what are you going to be doing different research in different ways at Harvard, or will you largely be continuing the work that you've been doing?
Well, I won't be completely continuing the exact same work that I'll be doing. Well, first of all, of course, I'm looking forward to it. I think I am about to live what was like my 16-year-old dream of having my own lab. So I am certainly looking forward to it. It is a scary transition. I have been a part of the US government research enterprise since I was 19 years old in some capacity.
Wow.
So to go to a private institution is something that is very frightening for me. But nevertheless, I can do it and I will. The work that I will be doing will be similar to what we're doing with coronaviruses. And I'll continue to do coronavirus research. And I actually will be continuing to work very closely with NIH as a special volunteer to make sure that the projects are wrapped up to, because they are such dire projects. But moving forward, I will be going back to my roots and studying very fundamental viral immunology in the same way we have for coronaviruses, but also for other viral families to inform vaccine development for pandemics. So taking this exercise and all of the learning that we've and what we've found out for coronaviruses, but applying it to other viral families as well.
Dr. Corbett, thank you so much for your time. I just want to ask one more question. Admittedly,
Sure.
it was two parts. So at your spring commencement recently, just a few weeks ago at UNC Chapel Hill, you mentioned Thanksgiving at your grandmother's house. And I should say Thanksgiving is the biggest family holiday we have in our home. It's when we have family and family friends, and now kind of our friends' families. And so, it was certainly something that we missed this past year and we are looking forward to this year. And you have a tradition at your home that sounds very similar to what we have. And I want to just kind of ask you, as you kind of are kind of reflecting on this last year, kind of in the tradition of Thanksgiving at your grandmother's home, when you all reflect on what you're thankful for, kind of what are you thankful for after the last kind of very challenging kind of year and a half? And what are you most optimistic about going forward?
I think, so I have a lot of things that I'm thankful for. I actually have a gratitude journal that probably I will maybe publish one day, because I write in it, try to write in it just about every day. But I think in this moment that over the last year, I'm most grateful for the opportunity. I think that what is happening right now with the vaccine and also with the trajectory of my career is really what was the opportunities over the last, 19 years since I was 16, which are generally opportunities that people like me do not have. And so I have to really be thankful for every single program that, from a funding perspective or otherwise a resource perspective, really gave way to this moment for me. So I think that that's what I have reflected on most is what if this thing did not, what if I would have never even been shown that being a scientist was possible? How would things be different in this moment? So I'm so thankful for that. As far as being optimistic, one of the things that I have a really good friend who also went to UNC, but he is a viral evolutionary biologist, and we had a phone conversation even prior to this pandemic being called a pandemic by the World Health Organization. And he said, one of the things that's going to happen is this virus is going to pick up on all of the social things that we as humans have not tended to. And that's really what's happening. And I think I said on, previously that the virus is teaching us how to be better humans. And I hope that the lessons that the virus is teaching us stick with us. And I'm very optimistic that we're all going to come out of this better and as better people. Not just, for ourselves and our families, but for an entire world. Like, we just all have to be better to each other.
I couldn't agree more. And Dr. Corbett, I certainly am incredibly thankful to you and to your team and to, I know, truly the thousands of scientists who have worked probably nonstop over the last year and a half to be able to get us to the place where so many Americans are vaccinated. And now we just have to not only feel, but act on the imperative of helping to vaccinate the world.
Yes.
And I know we wouldn't be here without you and your team's work. So just thank you so much for all that you've done. We're so excited to see kind of what you do next. I have no doubt you will continue to save lives and to change lives. And thank you for your time today.